Most people go through life using the words soul and consciousness as if they mean the same thing, even though no one ever really stops to explain what either of them actually is. You hear phrases like, listen to your soul, or expand your consciousness, and they sound meaningful, yet vague, almost like poetic expressions rather than real parts of who you are. But what if these are not just ideas, and what if understanding the difference between them quietly changes how you see yourself and the world around you? Think about this in a very simple way. Right now, you are aware that you are listening. You are aware of your thoughts, of your emotions, of the fact that you exist in this moment. That awareness feels steady, like something that watches everything else come and go. But then there is also a sense of identity, the feeling of you, shaped by memories, personality, likes, dislikes, and experiences. Ancient traditions believed these two things were not the same, even though they are closely connected. For thousands of years, people across different cultures asked the same question in different ways. What part of us observes life, and what part of us is shaped by it? Is the soul something we carry, or is it something we are? And is consciousness created by the brain, or does the brain simply act like a receiver for something deeper? These questions are not abstract or distant. They show up in everyday life more often than we realize. When you look back at a memory and feel like a different person now, who is the one noticing that change? When you feel emotions rise and fall, yet sense that something within you stays present the whole time, what exactly is that presence? Ancient thinkers believed these moments were clues, small hints pointing toward a deeper structure inside human experience. The reason these ideas often feel confusing is because most people were never taught to look at themselves this way. We learn how to name objects, follow rules, and build identities, but rarely how to observe the awareness behind those things. Over time, soul and consciousness become blurred together, and something essential gets lost in the process. As we explore this calmly and clearly, without complicated language or dramatic claims, the goal is not to give you something new to believe, but to help you notice what is already there. This understanding unfolds best when it is approached with curiosity instead of pressure, almost like rediscovering something you once knew but forgot how to describe. And if this kind of exploration feels grounding rather than overwhelming, staying connected by subscribing to the channel simply makes it easier to continue these conversations over time, at a pace that allows ideas to settle naturally instead of rushing past them. For now, keep one gentle question in mind. What part of you is aware of this moment, and what part of you is being observed? To move forward, it helps to slow everything down and look closely at something you experience every day, but almost never examine. Throughout your life, your opinions have changed, your beliefs have shifted, your personality has matured, and your understanding of the world has evolved. Yet through all of those changes, there has always been something quietly present, something that noticed those changes happening. When you were a child, you had certain fears, interests, and ways of seeing the world. Today, many of those are different. But who is the one that can look back and say, I was different then? That simple observation reveals something important. There is a part of you that moves and changes, and there is a part of you that observes those movements without being changed by them in the same way. Ancient traditions use different words for this distinction, but the idea was surprisingly consistent. The personality, shaped by memories, habits, and experiences, was seen as something that develops over time. The observer behind it, however, was seen as more stable, more constant. This observer is what many traditions referred to when they spoke about consciousness. To make this easier to understand, imagine watching clouds pass across the sky. The shapes change constantly. Some clouds are dark and heavy, others light and soft. But the sky itself does not become those clouds. It allows them to pass through. In this analogy, your thoughts and emotions are like the clouds, while consciousness is like the sky that holds them. The soul, according to many teachings, sits somewhere between these two. It was often described as the part of you that carries meaning, direction, and a sense of individuality across experiences. The soul feels personal, while consciousness feels spacious. One gives you a sense of being someone, while the other gives you the ability to be aware at all. This distinction explains why people can feel lost even when they are highly intelligent or successful. You can develop the personality endlessly, adding skills, roles, and achievements, while still feeling disconnected. That disconnection often comes from living almost entirely at the level of identity, without noticing the awareness behind it. Nothing about this is meant to create distance from life. In fact, recognizing awareness often brings you closer to it. You become less tangled in every passing thought and more present with what is actually happening. Ancient teachers believed this recognition was not an achievement, but a remembering. For now, let this idea settle gently. There is something in you that thinks, feels, and acts, and there is something in you that notices all of that happening. Understanding the difference between the two is the first real doorway into the relationship between soul and consciousness. As the difference between awareness and identity becomes clearer, another subtle question begins to form. If consciousness is the quiet observer that notices everything, why does it feel so open and limitless, while the soul feels more personal, more shaped, almost like it carries a story? Ancient traditions spent a long time reflecting on this distinction, because it explains much of the inner tension people feel without knowing why. Consciousness was often described as universal. It is the ability to be aware itself, not owned by one person, not limited by one life. This is why moments of deep stillness can feel strangely spacious, as if boundaries soften and the sense of me versus the world becomes less rigid. In those moments, awareness does not feel trapped inside the body. It feels like it is simply present, witnessing everything without effort. The soul, on the other hand, was understood as the part of you that carries individuality. It holds your sense of direction, your inner values, your emotional tone, and the feeling of being a distinct someone rather than just awareness itself. If consciousness is like light, the soul is like a lens that gives that light a specific color and shape. Without the lens, there is light everywhere. With the lens, there is focus and experience. This explains why people can have similar moments of awareness yet live very different lives. Consciousness may be the same in essence, but the soul expresses it uniquely through personality, culture, relationships, and choices. Ancient teaching suggested that this is not a mistake. It is how experience becomes meaningful instead of abstract. You can sense this difference in everyday moments. When you sit quietly and notice your breathing, awareness feels calm and open. But when you think about your hopes, regrets, or sense of purpose, something more personal appears. That personal quality is often what people refer to as the soul, even if they do not use that word consciously. Understanding this distinction brings relief. It means you do not have to choose between being an individual and being aware. Both are real, and both serve a purpose. The problem only arises when the soul forgets its connection to awareness, or when awareness becomes buried under constant identification with roles and worries. Ancient teachers believed that harmony comes from allowing consciousness and soul to work together. Awareness provides clarity and space. The soul provides meaning and direction. When one is ignored, life feels either empty or overwhelming. When both are recognized, experience becomes balanced. For now, let this idea rest gently. You are not just a personality moving through life, and you are not just empty awareness watching from a distance. You are the meeting point where consciousness becomes personal, and where the soul becomes aware. At this point, a very common and reasonable question usually appears. If consciousness observes and the soul gives personal meaning, then where does the brain fit into the picture? Modern life teaches us that the brain creates everything: thoughts, feelings, identity, and awareness itself. Ancient traditions did not deny the importance of the brain, but they understood its role in a different way. Instead of seeing the brain as the source of consciousness, they saw it more like an instrument. A radio does not create music. It receives signals and translates them into sound you can hear. If the radio is damaged, the sound becomes distorted, but the signal itself still exists. In the same way, ancient thinkers believed the brain allows consciousness and soul to express themselves in the physical world. This explains something science still struggles to fully answer. The brain is made of physical matter, cells, chemicals, and electrical signals. Yet awareness itself has no shape, weight, or color. You cannot place consciousness on a scale or point to it under a microscope. You can observe brain activity, but the experience of being aware remains something different from the activity itself. Think about pain for a moment. The brain can register signals from the body, but the experience of pain happens in awareness. The signal and the experience are connected, but they are not identical. The same is true for thoughts and emotions. The brain plays a role in organizing and expressing them, but the experience of them happens in consciousness. This perspective helps bridge science and spirituality without forcing them to fight each other. The brain becomes a translator, not an enemy of inner experience. When it functions well, awareness expresses itself clearly. When it is overwhelmed, tired, or injured, that expression becomes limited, but awareness itself does not disappear. Understanding this also reduces fear. You are not simply a machine that stops existing when the machine breaks down. Nor are you a floating spirit disconnected from your body. You are a meeting point where awareness, soul, and biology interact to create lived experience. If this explanation helps things feel clearer rather than more confusing, taking a moment to like the video is a simple way to support this kind of calm, grounded exploration, so more people who have these questions can encounter them without noise or exaggeration. For now, hold on to this balance. The brain matters. The soul matters. Consciousness matters. And understanding how they work together brings clarity instead of conflict. With the brain understood as an instrument and consciousness as awareness itself, the role of the soul becomes easier to see. Ancient traditions often describe the soul as a bridge, the connecting point between inner awareness and the outer world of experience. It is the part of you that translates what is felt inwardly into how life is lived outwardly. To understand this clearly, think about values, longings, and direction. Your body can move, your brain can think, and your awareness can observe, but the sense of why you care about certain things comes from somewhere else. That quiet pull toward meaning, creativity, connection, or purpose is what many traditions associated with the soul. The soul was not described as a ghost hiding inside the body. It was seen as the organizing center of experience, shaping how consciousness expresses itself through a particular life. This is why people with very similar circumstances can feel completely different inside. The soul gives experience its tone, like a melody playing through the same instrument in many different ways. This also explains why people often feel divided inside. Part of them wants safety, routine, and comfort, while another part longs for growth, truth, or deeper understanding. Ancient thinkers believed this tension happens when the soul feels pulled between the demands of the physical world and the quiet call of awareness trying to express itself more fully. You can notice this in everyday moments. When something feels meaningful, even if it is difficult, the soul feels engaged. When life feels empty or mechanical, it often means the soul is not being expressed, even if everything looks fine on the outside. This is not a failure. It is feedback. Understanding the soul as a bridge also brings compassion. It shows why change can feel uncomfortable. Growth requires the soul to adjust how awareness moves through the body and the world. That adjustment takes time, patience, and honesty. At this stage, one idea is enough. The soul is not something separate from your life. It is the part of you that gives your experiences depth, direction, and personal meaning, linking awareness to the world you move through every day. Once the soul is understood as the bridge between inner awareness and the outer world, it becomes easier to see how consciousness actually experiences life. Consciousness by itself is open and neutral. It observes, but it does not judge, desire, or fear. Those qualities appear when awareness moves through the soul and begins to take on personal meaning. Think of consciousness as a clear stream of water. On its own, it has no flavor. The soul is like the ground the water flows through. Depending on the soil, the water picks up minerals, temperature, and direction. By the time it reaches the surface, it carries a unique character. In the same way, consciousness flows through the soul and becomes a lived experience, shaped by emotion, memory, and perspective. This is why two people can go through the same situation and experience it completely differently. The event itself is neutral, but the soul interprets it, giving it meaning. One person may feel fear, another curiosity, another motivation. Consciousness is present in all cases, but the soul colors the experience. Ancient traditions believe this process is constant. Consciousness is always present, but it rarely experiences itself directly. Instead, it looks through the soul, much like looking through a window. The window does not create the view, but it shapes how the view appears. Smudges, cracks, or distortions change what is seen, even though the world outside remains the same. This understanding helps explain emotional patterns. When the soul carries unresolved fear, grief, or confusion, consciousness experiences life through those filters. The world feels threatening or heavy, not because it always is, but because awareness is moving through a narrowed lens. When the soul becomes clearer through reflection and understanding, the same world feels lighter and more open. Nothing about this process is a flaw. Ancient teachers believed it was part of learning. Experience allows the soul to mature, refine its understanding, and express awareness more clearly. The problem arises only when a person believes the lens is all there is and forgets the awareness behind it. At this point, the picture becomes simpler. Consciousness observes. The soul interprets. The brain expresses. Together, they create the experience you call your life. Understanding this relationship does not remove emotions or challenges, but it creates space around them, making them easier to navigate. Hold on to this idea. You are not trapped inside your experiences. Awareness is present behind them, learning through the soul how to experience the world with depth and meaning. At a certain point, understanding the relationship between soul and consciousness stops being just an idea and starts becoming something you notice in real time. You may catch yourself in the middle of a strong emotion and suddenly realize that something in you is aware of that emotion without being completely taken over by it. That quiet noticing is not distant or cold. It is calm, steady, and present. Ancient traditions believed this moment was important, because it marks the difference between being fully absorbed in experience and beginning to understand how experience happens. You still feel emotions, make decisions, and live your life, but there is now a little space between awareness and reaction. That space changes everything. You might notice this when anger appears, yet part of you can observe it rising and fading. Or when sadness is present, but you can still sense a deeper steadiness underneath it. These moments are not about suppressing feelings. They are about recognizing that feelings move, while awareness remains. This is often when people realize that they are not broken for having emotional patterns. They begin to see those patterns as part of how the soul has learned to interpret life so far. Fear, doubt, and longing are no longer enemies. They are signals showing where awareness is meeting old experiences through the soul. Ancient teachers believed this recognition was the beginning of real freedom. Not freedom from life, but freedom inside life. You no longer feel completely owned by every thought or emotion. You start to relate to them instead of being swallowed by them. If, while listening to this, you have recognized moments from your own life, times when you noticed yourself noticing, that reflection is meaningful. Sharing it can help others see that these experiences are common and deeply human. Leaving a comment about a moment when you felt this inner awareness, or when you realized you were more than your thoughts or emotions, often opens the door for others to recognize the same thing in themselves. For now, remember this. You are not just the experiences passing through you. You are also the awareness that can see them, learn from them, and move with them instead of being lost inside them. As you begin to notice the one who is experiencing thoughts and emotions, something quietly shifts in how life is lived. Situations that once felt overwhelming may still be challenging, but they no longer feel as absolute. There is a growing sense that life is happening through you, not to you, and that difference is subtle but powerful. Ancient traditions believed this shift marked a turning point. Before this recognition, a person tends to live almost entirely from habit, reaction, and expectation. Life feels like a series of events that must be endured, managed, or controlled. After awareness becomes more noticeable, experience begins to slow down just enough to be understood while it is happening. This does not mean you stop caring. In fact, many people find they care more deeply, but with less fear. When awareness is present, emotions are felt fully without being pushed away or exaggerated. Joy becomes richer because it is not clung to. Pain becomes easier to sit with because it is no longer seen as a threat to identity. You may notice this change in simple moments. A difficult conversation no longer feels like a personal attack. A mistake becomes something to learn from rather than something that defines you. Even silence starts to feel less uncomfortable, because awareness is no longer constantly searching for distraction. Ancient teachers often said that this is where wisdom begins to replace knowledge. Knowledge fills the mind with information. Wisdom changes how life is experienced from the inside. It grows naturally as awareness and the soul begin working together instead of pulling in different directions. This also explains why many people feel drawn toward stillness once they taste it. Stillness is not emptiness. It is awareness resting in itself, without being pulled immediately into reaction. From that place, actions become clearer and more intentional, not because rules are followed, but because understanding deepens. At this stage, nothing dramatic needs to happen. There is no finish line to reach. Simply noticing awareness in daily life slowly reshapes how you respond to the world. Over time, that quiet shift becomes more influential than any belief or concept. Hold this idea gently. Awareness does not remove you from life. It teaches you how to live it with clarity, balance, and presence. As awareness becomes more familiar, many people notice a quiet fear rising beneath the surface. It often sounds like a question that is never spoken out loud. If I am not just my thoughts, my emotions, or my story, then who am I really? Ancient traditions recognize this moment as natural, not dangerous. They believe this fear appears right before a deeper sense of stability begins to form. At first, identity feels like a safety net. It gives structure, predictability, and a sense of control. Letting go of tight identification with it can feel like standing at the edge of something unknown. But awareness does not erase identity. It loosens the grip it has on you. Instead of being trapped inside a role, you begin to use it more lightly. This is often when people realize that they are not disappearing at all. In fact, they often feel more grounded. When you stop defending a fixed idea of who you are, energy that was spent on protection becomes available for presence. Conversations feel more honest. Choices feel less forced. You begin responding instead of constantly reacting. Ancient teachers described this as maturity of the soul. The soul does not vanish when awareness grows stronger. It becomes clearer. Old patterns that were shaped by fear slowly lose their authority. Not because they are fought against, but because they are seen clearly for what they are, habits formed in moments when awareness was less present. You may notice that mistakes no longer feel like threats. Opinions become flexible. The need to prove yourself softens. None of this happens overnight. It unfolds gradually, through small moments of recognition that accumulate over time. This is also where compassion deepens. When you see how your own identity was shaped by experience, you naturally begin to see others the same way. Judgment loses its edge. Understanding grows without effort. Ancient traditions believed this shift was a sign that consciousness was no longer fully tangled in the soul's defenses. At this point, remember something simple. You are not losing yourself. You are discovering that who you are is wider, steadier, and more resilient than the roles you once thought defined you. As everything begins to settle, one final realization often appears, not as a dramatic moment, but as a quiet clarity. When you stop chasing answers about who you are, something steady remains. Awareness is still here. The soul is still expressing itself. Life continues, but it feels less tense, less forced, as if something unnecessary has been gently set down. Ancient traditions believed this was the natural outcome of understanding the relationship between soul and consciousness. You no longer need to define yourself so tightly, because experience no longer feels threatening. Thoughts come and go. Emotions rise and fade. Roles change with time. Yet something consistent remains present through all of it, calm enough to observe, alive enough to care. This is not detachment from life. It is a deeper participation in it. When awareness is recognized, everyday moments regain meaning. Simple things, a conversation, a walk, a pause before reacting, begin to feel complete instead of rushed. You stop looking for yourself in the future or in some distant ideal. You begin meeting yourself where you already are. The soul, in this understanding, does not disappear into awareness. It becomes more honest. Instead of being shaped mainly by fear or habit, it begins to express values, curiosity, and understanding more clearly. You still make choices, but they feel aligned rather than conflicted. Life feels less like a performance and more like a conversation you are present for. What makes this powerful is its simplicity. There is no final label to reach, no identity to upgrade into. The secret is not becoming something new, but seeing clearly what has always been here. Consciousness does not need improvement. The soul does not need to be fixed. They only need to be recognized in their proper relationship. This is why ancient teachings often ended quietly rather than with grand conclusions. The understanding they pointed to was meant to be lived, not admired. Once awareness is noticed, it continues to reveal itself naturally through daily experience, without effort or strain. If this exploration has helped you feel more grounded, more clear, or simply more at ease with your own inner experience, staying connected to the channel is an easy way to keep returning to these ideas over time. Subscribing is not about collecting beliefs, but about revisiting perspectives that help awareness stay present amid the noise of everyday life. As you move forward, remember this. You do not need to search for yourself endlessly. You are already here, aware, alive, and capable of understanding your experience from the inside. When soul and consciousness are seen clearly, life does not become perfect, but it becomes honest, spacious, and real.